I'm Anna,
I'm Jessica.
and this is the Paranoia Pair.
I in lieu of you doing a cult, I seen another thing and it was on Instagram. It said, "It's not that I think I'm too smart to ever get sucked into a cult. It's more that I know I am unwilling to participate in anything even resembling a group project under any circumstances." And that is so true.
Group projects were the bane of my existence.
Especially the ones where like they'd be like, "Choose your partner," and then like you knew nobody in class and then you just sat there like an idiot because you didn't have any friends in class.
Yeah.
Because in sophomore year, I think I had to do freshman and sophomore gym. I didn't know any of the freshmen. And so like in gym class when they'd be like, "Oh, choose a partner."
Can
Like
I choose myself?
like yeah, no one chose me. I mean I wasn't very good at anything anyways, sports related, but like and then they didn't know me.
We haven't done a cult before, so today's the day. We're going to cover the Heaven's Gate cult.
Okay.
It's pretty famous, I'd say. I would be surprised if there was like
Are they a sex cult?
they're not a sex cult.
That's a surprise.
Really?
I just feel like all cults are sex cults.
Oh, I feel cults are either like no sex whatsoever,
Except for the leader.
or like they're sucking and fucking like crazy.
Okay, I'm excited. I don't know who they are.
Okay. So, in order for this to not be a confusing mess, I'm going to start with the founders of the cult. So I'm actually going to move my laptop.
What are you doing?
I'm trying not to kill myself with the cord. It's not helping.
What was the goal here? What is the goal still? How long is your cord?
Okay.
I feel like you could have moved your microphone.
Oh,
And-
yeah. I definitely could have. Now that I strangled myself.
Because to get her laptop in front of her on her lap, she instead made it a moon phase behind her head and then just like pulled the computer behind her head to put on her lap
And then I got stuck.
between two cords.
Okay. So, Bonnie Nettles, who would later go by the name T in the cult, and Marshall, who went
T like the letter or T-E-A?
T like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Okay.
Marshall, and he would go by the name Doe. Marshall was born May 17th, 1931 in Spur, Texas, to Louise and Marshall Applewhite Sr. He grew up very religious because his father was a minister of the Presbyterian Church, and he hoped to follow in his father's footsteps. And he actually got a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and he also enrolled in the Union Presbyterian Seminary to study theology. And if you're anything like me, you're probably, what the fuck is theology?
Wait, isn't it like, no, never mind. No, never mind. Theories?
Do you want to guess?
Theories about religion?
Kind of, yeah. It's the study about beliefs of God or gods and the nature of the divine.
That'd be an interesting major, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty interesting, especially because like other religions are pretty fascinating to me, even though I don't believe in anything.
I mean, even Christianity is interesting when it's not being shoved down your face, but like learning about it, like from like an educational standpoint, would be kind of cool.
It's like trying to understand big questions about life and the universe, but like from a spiritual religious perspective. Different religions have their own theologies and which explain their beliefs and like the creation of the world and purpose of life and stuff and what happens after you die. And he married Anne Pierce, who was his high school girlfriend around that same time in 1952. Marshall actually left the seminary to pursue a career in music, and he actually would become a music director of a Presbyterian church in North Carolina. He was drafted into the Army in 1954, and he served for 2 years. In 1956, after his service, he went to study at the University of Colorado, and he earned a master's degree in music with the focus on musical theater. He moved to New York to get a job using his master's, and New York is known for like Broadway and performance. So it was a really good option for him. During this time, Marshall and Anne had 2 kids named Mark and Lane. And after his attempts at becoming a professional singer failed, he started teaching at the University of Alabama. He pursued a relationship with one of his male students, though, and he was let go. He was fired. After he was let go, him and his wife separated because she learned about his affair. They did get a divorce 3 years later. He came out to his parents, and his father, in true religious fashion, rejected him. His actual response was, "What sins have I committed for the Lord to treat me this way?" About his son being gay.
Dang.
So Marshall moved back to Texas in 1965 and got a job as a chairman of the music department of a private Catholic university in Houston. He became really popular in the community for his singing, and he was the choir director of the church and performed with the Houston Grand Opera. Despite being openly gay, Marshall did start a relationship with a woman, but due to the pressure from her parents, she broke up with him. Later in 1970, he resigned from his position at the university because of emotional turmoil, but it's suspected that he had another affair with a student at this school.
A student, right? Like a kid?
A student, he's working at colleges, so they're at least adults.
Oh.
They're at least adults.
Oh, I thought it was like a high school.
No, no, no.
Okay.
These are all at universities,
Okay, okay.
which makes it a little better, but it's still not great because the power dynamic is still there.
But at least they're of age. Sorry. Pardon.
Tim, hello? Are you in there? The president of the university said that near the end of Marshall's employment at the school, he seemed distressed and disorganized, and Marshall was really struggling mentally, and he had a hard time coping with his sexuality because he is so religious, and it's against everything that religion basically is. At one point, he even drove to a bridge and considered taking his own life. In 1971, he moved to New Mexico, and he opened up a deli, and the customers there liked him a lot, but despite this, he decided to move back to Texas that same year. And around that same time, his father had passed away. He developed severe depression because of his father's death. Basically, he hit rock bottom. He gained an incredible amount of debt, consistently had to borrow money from friends to make ends meet. And just a year later, in 1972, he met Bonnie Nettles. Quick rundown on Bonnie. Bonnie was born in 1927 on August 29th in Houston, Texas. She grew up with a Baptist church family. As an adult, she moved away from religion. She became a nurse, and she married a man named Joseph Nettles in 1949. Joseph was a very successful businessman, and he also was a World War II veteran, and they had 4 children together. Bonnie studied astrology, and she had a huge interest in the occult. She often would go see fortune tellers and perform seances with different groups to talk to the dead.
Listen, I would totally go to fortune tellers.
No judgment. I think that.
I would waste so much money.
Listen, I think that'd be so fun.
I've bought them off Etsy before.
I think it would be super fun to do those people who like draw your soulmate. That sounds fun.
It really does, except for mine would probably be like a cat or something.
The more she involved herself with these practices, the more strain it put on the marriage. And she was approached by someone who claimed to be a seer, which means like psychic, basically. They can see into the future. And said that she would meet a tall blonde man in 1972. Marshall had started getting into astrology around the time they met, and Bonnie had actually met Marshall at a hospital where she read him his astrology chart, and it kind of kicked off their relationship. And at the time, Marshall was a tall blonde man. So in Bonnie's mind, she's like, this fruition came true, and this is like my destiny. So during this reading, she told him that he was destined to be a prophet and guide lost souls back to the right path so they could go to heaven. They had become quickly infatuated with each other, and they started the new year 1973 by moving Marshall into the Nettle family home. But Bonnie and Marshall didn't have a sexual relationship. It was more like a platonic, deep friendship. But this still caused Joseph to file for divorce because it put even more of a wedge between them, and Bonnie did not receive custody of her children. Marshall and Bonnie moved together and opened a Christian bookstore. Their bookstore actually carried books from a variety of different spiritual backgrounds, and they had classes on theosophy and mysticism. And their building was called No Place, like no as in Know.
Okay.
So Theosophy is based on the idea that there's a deeper spiritual reality beyond what we can see and touch. So, theosophists believe that by studying spiritual truths and the ancient wisdom from different religions and cultures, we can understand the hidden reality and our place in the universe better. And mysticism is the pursuit of connecting with a higher spiritual reality that goes beyond ordinary human experience. And they believe that they can achieve a deep personal connection with the divine or the ultimate truth through practices like meditation and contemplation and prayer. It's more about experiencing spirituality firsthand than just believing in this thing that's been handed to you.
Are they bad people?
Unfortunately, they're
Okay.
kind of bad.
This kind of doesn't sound so bad right yet.
I'm kind of on board. This didn't last long though because these ventures failed, and in February the same year, they moved out of Texas. They funded their travels by working odd jobs and selling their blood. Um, they would often dine and dash to avoid paying for their food, and a couple times they were living off of bread rolls that they stole from a grocery store.
I fucking love bread rolls.
Put some mashed potato sandwiches.
Ah, you do that too?
Yeah, it would like every time at school when it was chicken nugget day, it would be chicken nuggets, a dinner roll, and mashed potatoes. And I would make a sandwich with my dinner roll, butter, and mashed potatoes.
Yes.
And then I'd take a bite of it and then bite a chicken nugget.
Oh, well,
It
minus the
was
chicken
so
nugget part,
good.
but, like, I do that now. I'll put, like, a bread roll from the bakery at Walmart in the oven and, like, crisp it up and then put some nice butter on it and mashed taters. I'm like, oh.
It's so good. So while they were on the road, they talked to each other about their personal beliefs. They also read different kinds of religious and fantasy books, and they watched Star Trek whenever they could. They were obsessed with Star Trek.
Hell yeah. Which series? Was it the original series?
Mhm.
Okay, good.
So Bonnie and Marshall had an epiphany one day in June 1974 while in Oregon reading Revelations in the Bible. It talked about two witnesses who were killed and brought back to life 3 days later when the Spirit of God entered them. The two witnesses heard God's voice say, "Come up here," and ascended into heaven in a cloud. Bonnie and Marshall believe that the cloud was actually a UFO, and when the Bible talks about God, Jesus, and the angels, they were talking about aliens who appeared to us as gods, which kind of makes sense.
I don't think that's far-fetched.
It's far-fetched.
No, I don't think it's
Okay.
far-fetched.
I was like, okay, I'm the crazy one in this relationship.
No, I don't think I think it could make sense.
So in the last days, the aliens will arrive in their spaceship, destroy the Earth, and save the faithful who are ready to, quote, graduate to the, quote, next level, which is what they called heaven. So one of their friends from Houston they talked to was actually pretty interested in the teachings, and they visited her in May 1974, and she became their first follower.
I'm literally so much more gullible than I thought I was because, like, this sounds fun.
Yeah. Just talking about aliens, camping with my friend, eating dinner rolls.
Dinner rolls with mashed potatoes.
And potatoes are so cheap, they'd fit it in our budget perfectly. Believing that their higher calling allowed them to ignore earthly laws, the pair was arrested for credit card fraud because police had found several stolen credit cards in Bonnie's possession after they were pulled over. They were pulled over because they would just like steal rental cars. They would borrow rental cars and just never return them. So it was marked as stolen. So they got pulled over and they found all those stolen credit cards on Bonnie. The charges were dropped against Bonnie, but Marshall was charged with theft for the rental car. He rented it out of St. Louis and he just never returned it. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison. And while he was in jail, Marshall really got into aliens and evolution, like even more than what he already was. When he got out of jail, Bonnie and Marshall started to advertise and hand out flyers inviting people to join their meetings where they would talk about their beliefs and recruit people that they called their crew. An example of one of these flyers reads, UFOs in the San Francisco area. Why are they here? Who they have come for? When they will land. 2 individuals say that they were sent from the level above human and will return to that level in a spaceship, and in parentheses says UFO. Within the next few months, this man and woman will discuss how the transition from the human level to the next level is accomplished and when this may be done. This is not a religious or philosophical organization recruiting membership. However, the information has already prompted a number of individuals to devote their total energy to the transitional process. If you have ever entertained the idea that there might be a real physical level in space beyond the Earth's confines, you will want to attend this meeting. And then it gives a date and time and place. They actually brought in quite a bit of people. During these meetings, Marshall did most of the talking and explained to people that they needed to get rid of their possessions and everything that tied them to the quote human level. And they called the group the Human Individual Metamorphosis, which is a pretty long name. So they delivered a sense of urgency with the crew, telling them that Bonnie and Marshall would be killed and come back to life, and that the spaceship that would take them all would be arriving very soon. So they were really going off of those disciples from earlier in the Bible. After a meeting in 1975, they convinced around 20 people to get rid of everything they had and become followers after a meeting in Oregon, and that caught a lot of attention in the national news, and people were leaving children, jobs, and partners behind to join this cult.
Jesus.
They had to abstain from sex, drugs, and rid themselves from all of their earthly possessions. And with the gain of the national attention they were getting, they stayed behind and started sending out their followers to hold the meetings in their place and do their recruiting because the media attention wasn't very great for them. They were like painting them out to be like terrible people. At one meeting in Arizona, a man named Robert, who was a sociologist, went to this meeting to see what was going on, remembering the media coverage he had seen about the group. And 9 people had joined from this meeting he attended. And he contacted his friend who was a journalist, and they actually went undercover into this cult. So upon getting to the meeting place, they had been separated. If you knew someone who was coming into the cult, they would put you in different camps to keep you separated because the whole idea of this cult was you're severing yourself from all the connections you had on Earth, including friends and family and your children.
Like when Bella became a vampire.
Yes, but with aliens. After 3 months, they left and met up in Montana, where they were originally from. They wrote a paper about everything that was going on in the group. Some of it was actually published in a psychology magazine. And what baffled people was that there was a lot of people joining this cult just on their own free will. Like they weren't being forced to it or anything. There wasn't any kind of controlling going around, and these people genuinely wanted to be part of this cult. People were allowed to leave if they wanted to as well. There was no hierarchy, so everyone was treated as equals, and they often moved from campground to campground, and there was about 200 people in this cult at the time. And they would meet in the morning and at night to do prayers. So at some point in the early days of the cult, the media actually figured out who Bonnie and Marshall were. At this time, they were going by the two. They also went by Bo and Peep, and they referred to their members as sheep.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And they were also called Guinea and Pig. The media published all kinds of stories about them. None of them were true, though. They compared them to the Manson family, blamed them for dead cows that were found in farmers' fields, because around this time is when farmers would find disemboweled cows in their field, and they were like, it's aliens. This really impacted the group. Their recruitment meeting attendances went way down. They actually had people leave their group because of these stories. And Bonnie and Marshall saw this as a martyr in a symbolic sense, which means that their group would be taken to the next level soon. So Bonnie ordered the recruitment meetings to stop, and they were no longer taking new members. In 1976 to 1979, the group went into hiding, and they moved their camps around frequently to avoid being found. The rules at the time began to be a bit more strict, and things inside the cult began to change a little bit. They experimented with weird diets, drinking and smoking were both forbidden. Lying and breaking the rules were considered to be major offenses. They had to wear baggy clothing. They had to keep their hair short, so there was no identifying like gender characteristics and sexuality. So basically, they wanted them all to look like Star Trek. They imposed a buddy system to keep each other in check and to make sure they were following the rules. Marshall would be their go-to person if they had any issues that needed resolved or like guidance that they needed. So he was kind of like their father and they were his children. They really focused on Marshall and Bonnie being the only people they could trust that would deliver them the truth about their mission, and they dwindled down to about 80 members during this period. Some of the members used fake names, and they were allowed to get jobs to help afford food for the group. They also used this money to pay members who were having like doubts in the group. And if you wanted to leave, they would buy you a bus ticket home and be like, here you go. Like, you can go back home if you want.
That's so nice.
Right? It's pretty nice. They had and like if you wanted to come back, they would welcome you back. It was actually very unlike all the other cults
I
where they're like, you have to stay, you're not allowed to leave, and like if you leave, we're like you're damned, basically.
I'm very curious on where they start going downhill.
They had multiple tests to see how devoted these people were by telling them a UFO was going to come, and they would let them camp out there for days, and whoever didn't stay or fully believe would be sent away. So they did have a lot of people coming back after leaving, and that's because of the effects that cults have on people. Some of these are like losing your sense of personal identity, which Bonnie and Marshall were doing. They disguised it as shedding your connections to the humankind, isolation by cutting off communication with family and loved ones, and also like any form of outside sources like news coming from TV, radio. This makes them depend on the group for information and severely limits their exposure to opposing or conflicting views that basically makes them use their brain to like make up decisions about their own beliefs themselves. So the mental manipulation and control can lead to different types of mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and PTSD, not to mention like cognitive dissonance that they struggled with, which basically is like your mind being like at war with itself over two conflicting beliefs that it has. This happens when your mind tries to find a way to take like uncomfy feelings that you have. So like in an effort to solve this, it goes back to a place of comfort and something like your cult's beliefs, because this is something that you are so at peace with for so long, it makes them go back. 1980, one of the members offered his trust fund to the group so they didn't have to stay in camps anymore. Um, and this is when they started renting out mansions.
What?
Yeah. This guy was, when he came into the group, he already was pretty wealthy. He was, I'm pretty sure he had like family businesses that he had connections to. He was pretty wealthy. Like a lot of these people were very, very smart. They were like super educated and everything. And it's actually like, it's like the polar opposite of what you would believe who would be suspect of being in a cult. They're like really educated people. And this was like kind of important because they needed them to be so smart because they needed them to recruit for them.
Makes sense. It just blows my mind that someone could have enough money to give away to
Right.
rent mansions.
They further relaxed their control in 1983 and allowed their followers to visit family on Mother's Day. And they were only allowed short stays. They were instructed to tell their families they were studying computers at a monastery to give them an excuse on why they weren't in contact. So these visits were to calm family members down by demonstrating that the followers remained with the group simply because they wanted to. And they actually had a group um of family members, and one of them hired a PI to follow them around and to like give them updates on like where they were, and they would show up to where they were camping to like try to get their family members to come back and like leave the cult, and that's why they would move around sporadically to avoid that from happening. So in 1983, Bonnie developed cancer in one of her eyes and it had to be removed. And she refused treatment, even though the doctor told her that it had started to spread to the rest of her body. Bonnie told herself that the doctor was lying. He was just ignorant because she couldn't die and that she and Marshall were supposed to go to heaven together. So she really fully believed this.
Could you imagine the level of delusion?
Yeah, I can't.
That's wild. To like not believe a doctor telling you have cancer in your eye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not going to die.
The cancer continued to worsen though and moved to her liver, and Bonnie died on June 19th, 1985. Marshall had told the group that Bonnie's body had too much energy to remain on Earth and that she had moved to the next level and that she would be waiting up there for them, and that Bonnie was still communicating with him. And he actually didn't tell Bonnie's children that she had died until a year after. Marshall told his followers that he had been left behind because he still had more to learn, and Bonnie had held a higher spiritual role than he did. So he became very depressed, and his followers were there to support him. And Bonnie was really the head of the group, and Marshall really kind of struggled to like live up to like what she had
Her
been. Yeah,
standards.
didn't really do that good of a job to like taking her place. He became really, really controlling, and he even claimed that he was Jesus and that Bonnie was God. And in an attempt to form unity, he had all the members perform a group marriage. So he had bought them all $100 rings, and they came up one by one to Marshall, and he would place the gold ring on their finger and he would kiss their foreheads.
Okay, if they still had 2,000 or if they still had 200 around 200 people, that'd be $20,000.
Yeah. They were like way down.
Oh, okay, okay.
He also had become sexually attracted to his close assistant, and since there is a strict no sex rule, Marshall told him that he had to relieve him of his duties and replace him with someone else. And the assistant was really hurt by the news, and he actually had gotten really close to Marshall. This next part is going to be a little wild. Kind of TMI.
Okay, I'm
But
ready.
it's part of the story. It's a significant event that happened, so it has to be told. Marshall had actually disclosed to the group that he had went to bed and his body had involuntarily released semen in his sleep, and that he was frustrated that he wasn't able to prevent this from happening.
Poor guy.
So one of the members had come up with the idea of castration because it would help with sex appeal and it would remove the testicles, and testosterone levels would go down. Marshall, he's on board with this. He loves this idea, decides that he's going to do this, and other members also decide they're going to do this with him. It looks a little weird with a group of men coming in together, all wearing the same outfits with the same haircut, coming into a doctor's office and asking for this procedure.
You can ask for that to just get done?
Yeah, you can go get a vasectomy whenever you want.
Oh, you said castration. Here, I was
Yeah.
thinking they were gonna get their nuts cut off.
No, they want castration, but this would be a vasectomy.
Okay, okay, okay.
So one of the female members was actually a nurse, and she volunteered to do this. She volunteered to do the castration, so they prepped a room for the castrations to be done in. And Marshall, I gotta admit, this was a pretty us move. He taped a sign to the door that said Mexico on it. Because if something happened to the members, they could tell the authorities that the procedures were done in Mexico and they wouldn't be lying technically. And this feels like a workaround that I would do as a child.
Jesus. That's kind of smart.
Right. I can see us doing something like this. Not castration, but the Mexico thing. Yeah, so technically it wouldn't be a lie because it did happen in this room they were calling Mexico. These men were very excited to get this done, and they even held a coin toss to see who would get it done first.
That's crazy.
And the man who won the coin toss was numbed, and the nurse removed his testicles, but his penis actually started to swell up, and he was in a lot of pain. The swelling didn't go down, and they had no choice but to take him to the hospital. After dropping him off at the hospital, 2 members of the cult drove to a pier, and they threw his testicles into the ocean to get rid of the evidence in case the police came looking.
I would have wanted to keep them.
Right? And
Like your teeth?
They can't keep them because if the police come.
I know. But imagine just jars of testicles.
The great news is, though, that he made a full recovery.
So what about his penis?
His penis was fine.
So did the nurse learn how to do more castrations?
No, they actually decided they were going to go to a doctor. The remaining men who still wanted the castration found a doctor to do it instead. And around the time the castrations, there was quite a few people who decided they were going to leave because they thought things were getting a little too weird up in here. So in 1988, they mailed a document that detailed their beliefs to a variety of New Age religion organizations because it was becoming very popular. New Age religion is a spiritual movement that focuses on personal growth, self-awareness, and a connection to the universe. And people who follow New Age beliefs often practice meditation, yoga, and healing techniques like crystal therapy. I
Oh,
heard
the
that.
woo-woos. And I'm also not insulting the woo-woos because
Mhm.
I definitely have crystals in my house.
I think they're pretty, but do I believe that they have healing powers? No, I just think they're pretty sparkly rocks.
I totally don't believe that that could be plausible at all.
Marshall got his passion for preaching back, and he began telling everyone about the upcoming end of the world. This isn't really far fetched because there was onset panic around the world ending in the year 2000. People believe that computers were using 2 digits for the year. Um, and make the computers stop working, which would cause planes to fall from the sky and cars to stop working and even nuclear missiles launching. This is the same year that they refined their thinking and they actually wrote the history of their cult. This launched the final recruitment period for the cult in the 90s, and Marshall had told the members that their learning period was nearly over and that it was almost time to go to the next level. And they had a satellite TV series that they called Beyond Human: The Last Call, and that was put out in 1992.
They made a
Mhm.
series?
A satellite TV series that they filmed. For the first time in this cult's history, they allowed people to write in questions. In an interesting turn of events, the people who were watching the TV series were not the entire world they were envisioning. It was just members of the group who had left. Many of them wanted a way to reconnect and return, and that's exactly what they did. As always, members who returned were welcomed back with open arms, and they had time to adjust back to cult life and the next level of preparation. So the cult took out an almost $30,000 ad in USA Today in 1993, warning the Earth was about to be recycled, and this was their last chance at salvation. They had a PO box where people could send in their questions, and they would take videos of Marshall speaking on their beliefs, and they would mail them to people. In 1994, the group sold all of their possessions except for a couple cars and some clothing, and they traveled the country and they held meetings for 9 months. They gained 26 new followers this way, but they also dealt with a lot of mocking that took place in these meetings because they had basically become a laughingstock in the media. And they felt like these new 26 members were of the same mindset as them and that the plan that God gave to them was really coming to life. The solution the cult came up with to progress to the next level was suicide. But this was after Marshall seen what happened in Waco. He really made it into like fear mongering in the cult. And he suggested that the cult members buy weapons because they would basically be like Waco and they would be taken out. So they didn't have to do anything. It wouldn't be their fault basically because the group thought suicide was wrong. It was quickly shut down though because other members were against it. They were like, this is too violent. We don't want guns. There were members of the group who didn't agree with this and they thought it was going too far and they had left. They actually lost 5 members because of this. Um, one of the members left not because he didn't oppose the idea of suicide, it was because he didn't feel like he was worthy. And that's because he was struggling with his sexual needs and he was secretly watching MTV.
Not MTV.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say porn.
Well, he was doing activities by himself on top of watching MTV. So he felt like he wasn't worthy of moving along cuz everyone else was working so hard and that um he just needed to leave. In 1995, the discovery of the Hale-Bopp comet was made. Astronomers calculated that the comet would pass closest to Earth in March of 1997. There was a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding this comet. There was one that really spoke to the group's interests, and it was that there was this bright, unidentified object that was following the comet that was being called a UFO. So they went, wow, this spaceship is coming to take us to the next level. They went up to the store and they bought a telescope, but they didn't see anything behind the comet. So they returned the telescope and told the manager it didn't work. So with the graduation date planned for around March 21st, 1997, they decided they were going to travel for the remaining time they had on Earth. They also interviewed each other about how they felt about graduation to the next level and that no one should feel sad for them. So, starting about March 22nd or March 23rd, the remaining 39 cult members ate applesauce or pudding that had been laced with a heavy dose of barbiturates and washed it down with vodka. They did it group by group. So, group A would eat the poison concoction, lay down in their bunk beds or makeshift beds that they had made until they passed either out or away. Then, group B would be assigned a person to take care of, which meant placing bags over group A's heads to ensure that they had passed. And if they were just passed out, they would asphyxiate and suffocate. They would then cover them with a purple shroud, and that's basically a cloth that they use to wrap a person's body before burial, and this was believed to happen over the course of a few days. I can't imagine just, like, walking through a house with, like, dead bodies in it of, like,
Yeah.
my friends. You're my only friend, so
Well, then at least it wouldn't be too many. Just one.
Marshall was the 37th person to die, leaving behind only two others to prepare his corpse and take their own lives. Authorities were alerted via an anonymous tip on March 26th, and they had found 39 bodies laying in bunk beds and other resting places, dressed in identical black tracksuits and Nike sneakers covered in purple shrouds. Their matching patches on their sleeves said Heaven's Gate Away Team. The anonymous caller was later found to be a former member who had left the group just a few weeks before the suicides took place, and he received a package in the mail of the cult's video interviews and last words, along with a map to the mansion. At least three former members of Heaven's Gate died by suicide within a few months of the following, like within a few months of the mass suicide, hoping to join their friends in the next level. One of them was actually a couple who had left behind a child.
No.
Authorities had to borrow trucks to transport these bodies because there were so many, and they had to hold a press conference at a fairground in effort to accommodate all of the press. At the press conference, it was revealed that they had found a handwritten note that had instructions on how to mix their poison in to their applesauce or pudding, and then instructed them to drink the mixture that was in the vodka. So the toxicology reports showed phenobarbital in their systems, and it's a barbiturate used to treat epilepsy, anxiety, and insomnia, and it works by calming the nervous system and overactive nerves in the body, and combining this with alcohol intensifies the sedative effect, and it can cause breathing difficulty. Following the mass suicide in 1997, the story was all over the place. It had sensational coverage, and um, the intense media scrutiny kind of amplified awareness on how dangerous cults can be, like in their influence. And it also had a lot of critical discussions about mental health. There's a lot of vilification about mental health, and
Yeah.
this made it worse. Actually, there is a replica of how they found the bodies in a museum.
What about the house that it happened in?
I will get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
Um, Displayed in the museum is a bed with a makeshift body covered by a purple shroud, and a pair of Nike shoes are poking out of the bottom. There's also a TV that plays some of the videos of Marshall Applewhite, which I think is kind of freaky deaky. They also have a Heaven's Gate website that's still up and running, and I believe I think I read somewhere that it's being monitored by former members who are still alive, because they I went to that website and it's still active and everything. Like, it's still up.
So what are they doing? Like,
It's I think they're just like maintaining the domain. So like someone's paying for this website to be still up.
and the website, I'm assuming, is just like
It's just
stating
a
their beliefs and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's just about like the cult and their beliefs and stuff. And the history. They actually have a spot on their website where they transcribed some of his speeches into German so you can read it.
Hmm.
Um as for the house that they were renting in Rancho Santa Fe where they had died, The damage that was done was estimated to be over six figures because of the drapes placed on the walls. The marble floors and carpet were damaged by the gurneys, and the owner at the time who rented it to the group had planned to fix it up and move back in it, which I would sell it. Ultimately, it had been sold quite a few times, and it did end up getting demolished and a new house was built in its place in 2006. The street name was also changed to help prevent people from coming up to the area whose sole purpose was to go to the house, and that's it.
Well, I hope that if there's an afterlife, they got what they wanted,
Mhm.
and or they're with aliens. I don't know. I just some of their teachings were like
I
could have
mean,
won me
I
over.
can see how their beliefs system worked.
Well, and it's similar to like the ancient Egyptians. Like so many people think like that possibly their gods could have been aliens, and
Mhm.
like everyone says that they were like a lot more advanced than we know, or all that jazz. So like I just feel like goes along well with some other.
Well, and there's also, like, all those ideas about how, um, like, ancient monuments were made, like, with alien technology, like the pyramids and I think it's called the Nazca Lines.
There's also those ones, those like giant humanoid statues that are in the ground and just the heads are out. I think they believe those are aliens too.
I do believe in aliens. I just feel like we have advanced so much, so why do we think that we're the only, like, civilization in the world? Because like, space I can't even conceptualize how big space is.
I think they're embarrassed of us. And like
I would be.
we're so like moody and unstable and like irrational. Like it's no
Well,
wonder why they don't come, because if they even if they're like come in peace type thing, we're not gonna believe that. And then
yeah,
we're just gonna try to take over their planet.
and humankind kinda sucks.
Yeah.
Like, we as a society do really kinda suck.
I wouldn't trust us.
No.
It's best that we don't have communications with other.
Yeah, like, why would they insert themselves into a world where we are, like, pitting countries against each other?
And we can't even take care of our own world.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want us in somebody else's world. But anyways, thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at Paranoia Pair Pod. And we will see you next Friday.
Stay spooky.